So tonight we were talking about triggers, and before I push record, we were discussing foods that bother us, and maybe things that, when we say bother, we were talking about arthritis and joint issues, that sort of thing. I wanted to start off, since it was brought to my attention, I want to just keep you guys aware of that, because tonight we'll talk about emotion triggers, things that pester us in our soul and even in our spirit to some extent, which then affects our body physically. But as we think about whole body healing, excuse me one sec. If I feel like you have a cough and you need to push mute. But as we think about whole body healing, it's really important to start assessing the whole person. So if you have something where maybe as you get older, your joints, your feet, your whatever, your back, something doesn't feel quite right, not only should we assess our emotions, but also what we eat, what we put in our bodies, because so many times that affects it. I was just sharing, and then we'll get to the emotion part, that once my husband passed away, Mark and I we have been plant-based. I hate to say vegan because sometimes that goes with a whole nother, that personality and that type of person definitely was me before I knew the Lord. All things animal rights, and still to some extent I feel real strongly about some things, but we were plant-based eaters we have been for 10 years, pretty strict. And then he was a marathon runner, super healthy guy, and so to have him pass of cancer was like, what? I mean, if I didn't love them so much, I probably would have pitched those out the window as well. But healthy eating, I'm like, what's the point? We started eating this way because Zion got cancer, my oldest son, if you don't know that story. And so in that time, in the last 14, almost 15 months, I have noticed a huge ramification on my joints, just different parts, and also my clothes don't fit as nicely and as snugly, or not as snugly, as loosely. Now they're giving me a nice warm hug. I always say that when I put on, I'm like, look, you're hugging me a little too much, sweater. So you assess those things, right? And as we dive into triggers, then it's important to think about, well, how is this affecting me physically, but then also emotionally. So as I've taught emotions about emotions, let's see, we're 2022, I guess 6-7 years now. And triggers is something that we talk about in every class. And I try to find a new word for that every time I speak about this, because the word drives me bananas. I mean, no offense to anybody who's younger than me listening. I promise you that is never my intent. But the younger generation, like I swear to you, I sound like my mother or my grandmother now, because this young generation, they use triggers like, it's just this buzzword. And I'm thinking like, oh, that triggered me. But do you even know what that word means? Do you know where it comes from? Fine if you know where it comes from and using it appropriately. It's kind of like when people say irregardless. I'm like, that's a double negative. You can't say that. I'm not a grammar nerd, but sometimes it comes out. In any case, I usually attempt to find a new word for triggers. And here's the thing, guys, there isn't one. I've looked. There's just nothing that really nails it. And it's so important that we understand this, because as you'll see, when we have an overly, I'll just use air quotes, overly emotional reaction to something that by all rights we wouldn't normally react that way. If the shoe were on the other foot, we might look at somebody else and say, that's odd. That's a trigger. It's something that sets it off. And the other thing to note, and this is just file it in the back of your mind, that every time we walk through a difficult season, we have this opportunity for new things to emerge, new emotional upheavals, new triggers, new things that, set us off. That was a word that the dictionary came up with for a synonym for trigger. I didn't care for that one as much. And these are for our benefit, so that we're better able to see where the rough spots are And we are able to see what needs to be sanded off. Because really in this life, we are not meant to stay stagnant. If you can look back on even just the last 2 years of your life, 3 years, I don't want to say, 6 months or a year, give yourself some time, but 2, 3 years, even 4 years, and you haven't seen emotional maturity and growth, and you haven't seen a physical shift for the better, and even a spiritual a spiritual growth and maturity, then you're stagnant. And this is not what we are meant to be. We don't want to just blithely go through life waiting for the sweet by and by. That's not ever what God meant for us as humans. And so I've come to the point where when a trigger happens, I'm almost grateful, especially because then I'm aware of, oh, okay, that set me off. Why? And I'll discuss how we dive into this. And then I'm able to head off of the past and deal with that emotion that obviously was still there, that negative emotion and reaction. As in the last 15 months, walking through losing my husband, I have had to relearn how to master triggers, these new ones that have come up, and even old ones that I thought were gone. And maybe that's something that you experience, that you think you've got it. And if you've sat in my classes before and you're like, oh, we've talked about triggers. Yeah, I got it. Really ask yourself, do I? Because sometimes things start to well up and we don't know why, and we just maybe blow it off. So before we dive in, I do want us to do a little bit of a reset. So take some oils, and I'm not, me, I'm not real militant on which oils. I happen to have lavender and frankincense, which I want to say I've been rocking these 2 oils for about the last 2 or 3 weeks, just sitting here. I'm just really loving them. But let's take a few seconds to sit here and just breathe. Just breathe. I was at the market today, driving around. I find myself shallow breathing because I feel like I'm in a rush. So just take a few minutes, or a few seconds rather. And remember, when you're breathing, make sure it's from your belly. Notice you can put your hand on your stomach and make sure that it rises as you breathe. Make sure your chest isn't going up and down. You might put your feet on the floor just to center yourself a bit. Okay. So what are triggers? If you're unfamiliar with what these are, it's simply put something that sets off a memory tape or a flashback, mentally transporting somebody, a person, somebody else, to an event of some sort of trauma or hurt. Now, the interesting thing about this is that you're not always aware of that event or that flashback. Something might occur and you have this reaction. Your body and your emotions are back there, but you may not really be aware of it. These are all very personal, and they're different things that set off different people. Someone who experiences certain pain points or triggers may avoid situations because they think that it'll set off an unpleasant memory or a feeling. This can be understandable, although allowing the trigger to dictate our life is really unacceptable, because then it affects your quality of life. Each person's triggers may be activated through one or more of our senses. It can be a sight, something you see, a sound that you hear. I don't even know if this is a trigger. You guys can all weigh in on this. My entire family, we want to stab the other person if they scrape their fork across the plate. I don't know, is that a trigger? Is that just like a weird idiosyncrasy we all have? We have these plates since we moved. I inherited my grandma's china, my great grandma's china, I think. And the kids accidentally go scream. We're like immediately. And I don't know, I feel like that's maybe not a trigger. No, none of us were traumatized. It's just that sound. But that's a good visual of what the sound of something triggers you. It's an irritation for us. Smell can be a huge trigger. Yes, nails on a chalkboard. Oof. Yeah, smells. How many of you guys have ever shared essential oils with somebody, or you have had oil shared with you and the smell just instantly irritates you? I've shared a number of times my issue with Stress Away. I had an issue with cedarwood. I love it now. I love both of them now. Lavender, also not a joy. And if you share essential oils, I want to encourage you. Clary says that's an interesting one. I want to encourage you, if you share them with other people, to really be patient and understanding to where they might be. You know, way back when Young Living, not when it first started, but when we first started sharing, I know I was quite rude, and I would say, oh, that means you need it. Maybe that's not necessarily rude. That wasn't my intention, but to try to read someone's mail right then is inappropriate. Maybe offering something that they do enjoy and say, oh, well, you know what, this could mean that you're just being emotionally pestered by it. So this wouldn't be the one for you, instead of shoving it more into someone's face. Taste is also can be triggering. For my friends, again, just a little poll here. How many of you guys are in the cilantro tastes like soap category? Anybody in here? No, have you heard of that, Deb? I heard of it maybe, I don't know, a handful of years ago, and I was like, what? I have a friend who gave us all her cilantro because she's like, yeah, it tastes like soap. Never in my life had I heard of this. But I started to hear more and more people that have this. So that taste, anything that has cilantro in it is super triggering, because it's like, no, that's disgusting. And I would assume that the trigger would be, you think you're going to sit down to some delicious Mexican food, and then all of a sudden you're hit with dish soap. Like, ooh, that would be unfortunate, wouldn't it? So taste can be very triggering. Sensory, if you have children who have sensory issues, or you know children or even adults, right? Just, yes, that touch, that can be extraordinarily triggering for some people. Ours is not necessarily a reason why someone is being triggered. It's none of our business. And even if those types of things really outside of, if we just can't pinpoint it, just understanding that we have this trigger, we know this is a situation, and then we can better deal with it. We bring an awareness to it, and then we're able to handle it. Most people know without a doubt what their trigger would be, right? The challenging part comes in to know, okay, why, if that's important, and then really even more importantly is how to deal with it, how to head it off at the pass. When you know something is triggering you, we'll get to it. There's a few steps to walk through, but understanding the difference between a response and a reaction. And you may want to write those two words down. They're very different. Share them with your people, guys, because reacting and responding, two very different things. You know, when I share with everyone, guys, don't slap your oils on like this. It's because we're reacting. Well, there's a lot of reasons why I don't care for that, but we're reacting to, okay, I need to put this on, I'm just going to slap it on. Where when we take it and we breathe it in, we give ourselves a chance to respond. So reacting to something is quick, it's immediate, we tend to do it without thinking. When we respond, we pause, we breathe, we might measure our words. We should measure our words. I've heard it said, words are the children of our mouth. We should know where our children are, right? So if we think before we speak, we are now responding. When we react, we typically are in that fight or flight mode, that adrenaline, cortisol releasing, getting out of danger really quick mode. And most of us living in the West, we typically aren't in danger for the most part every day of our lives. So there's no reason to have to run away really quick. So we have the opportunity to be able to respond. And responding, even if our body wants to start reacting, if we breathe, we slow it down, our heart rate slows down, we're now able to respond. We force our body to get in line with what we want. If you're triggered, if someone that you live with is triggered, or someone that you're engaging with, whether it's online, over text, over the phone, they start to get triggered, just acknowledging it, understanding it, and giving yourself and the person that you're dealing with scores of grace. Triggers are so personal, and different things can set different people off. Some of us may experience triggers and we don't realize it. And until we maybe walk away from a conversation, it's like, wait, why did I react that way? That was weird. That's a clue. So now that we understand really what they are, we need to learn how to master them, head them off of the past. Triggers will happen. I'm not one to speak a lot of negativity, except for there's this time in life where I think, okay, but we have to be real. People are still people. Not everybody's going to sit with us. Obviously, there's more than 6 people in the whole world on a Monday night, right? So there, out of 8 billion people here, we're here learning, and hopefully other people are learning elsewhere. However, for the most part, I find that few people take time to dive in and assess their emotions. A lot of folks in our world react. They don't take the time to respond. And so when we come into contact with those people, now we're having some situations. So we head them off of the past, we master the triggers we have in ourselves so that when it comes again, we can assess it for what it is and do the grace thing, respond, breathe, and all of that. So in a perfect world, it would never happen again, but again, here we are living with other humans. Mastering our triggers, please hear me, guys. Mastering our triggers does not mean that we stuff our feelings and emotions, we acknowledge it. I've said this before, and I probably will say it every class at least once. In the next book I write, in the next class that I release, all of it, I need you all to understand. No, I don't need you to. That it really doesn't have any bearing on me, except for I care about you all very much. So maybe that's why I say that. It would be great if you all could understand that there's a difference between conscious languaging and being really aware of what we speak and giving ourselves the opportunity to acknowledge something for what it is. To see it for what it is, to say it out loud. I'm struggling with this. I'm feeling that I have this feeling, whatever we need to say, so that we get it out of here and onto paper, out to a trusted friend, right? I know for me, when I first learned about speaking life and conscious languaging, I felt like I couldn't speak. I didn't, and that actually, for me personally, did a little bit more damage than just saying the word. I grew weary of if I said, oh, I'm tired. Oh, you mean you feel tired? Yeah. Okay. Yes. Okay. Sorry. So when we are learning to see what's happening, sometimes we have to be aware that we can't always choose life-giving words. It just has to be acknowledged. And I learned that, you guys, after my husband passed away. I couldn't speak life to make him not be dead, is the thing. And I just couldn't. And for those of you who've lost a loved one, you understand. You say what you need to say. And I'll tell you this is how you know who your tight circle is. You remember we've talked about our people who can sit with us on the porch? That's how you learn. And that's okay. Because you start to understand who has grown up emotionally, mature-wise, and been able to say, okay, they're walking through a rough day. I'm going to listen and sit with them. That sort of thing. So, as I mentioned, when we react, we begin to shallow breathe. If we respond, we force ourselves to slow it down. This is why in every class we do breathing. We've been doing a lot more AFT in our groups because I want us all to take the time, whether it's once a week, once a month, out of our day, our lives, to breathe. Because when we start to breathe slowly, when we practice responding in times where we're not being triggered, when it does happen, we're able to go, oh wait, that felt better than this feels. So we don't need to break out into a full sprint usually. So teaching ourselves, our brain, our body, our will, our emotions, our mind, our everything, these next steps is paramount to having good emotional health and heading off all triggers when they come, new, old, and everything in between. So the first step is pausing. I mentioned that a little bit ago, but there is power in the pausing, taking a moment to collect ourselves, receive clarity, and then we're better able to take control of the situation. I won't do a show of hands, but just think about it for yourself. How many times have you heard something comes across your desk, maybe you see a post or you're having an experience, something's happening, and when you react, it's never the right choice. It's rarely the right choice. Recently, it was so funny. My son did something and his reaction or response to me about what he did helped me to not freak out, if that makes any sense. So he backed into our mailbox and it shifted. This is when he was leaving for work. It was dark. And he comes in and goes, hey, Mom, I hit the mailbox. There's nothing wrong with the car. It's okay. I'm sure I can just push it. Me and the boys will push it later. And so I'm thinking, sweet, no worries. Like in my mind, now I think about it, I'm like, it's this huge mailbox taller than him. Like, okay, whatever. So I didn't react to it. I responded. When I saw it, because I had already responded, I realized it's actually worse than he said. Oh gosh, we actually might need a new mailbox. But because my body had already responded, I didn't get into reaction mode. It was actually really cool. I thought, well, that's neat. Because had I watched him do it, I might have, I don't know, been like, what are you doing? The other thing is, when you are in this habit and you have other people who are more prone to reacting, you start to see them get a little hyper, a little excited. And so you can pause, and by you slowing your response down, they kind of lean in and have to wait for your response, which makes them pause and slow down. And it's this beautiful cycle of breathing and responding. They can receive better clarity. We can get better clarity. We might even take a moment to just pray. I know we say think before we speak, but I'm a huge fan of praying before I speak because, my goodness, sometimes if I don't, who knows what's going to come out my mouth. The second step is breathe. This should not become a surprise that this is part of the step. We pause and then we breathe. I'm going to get a t-shirt that says just breathe. I don't know, because we all just need to breathe more. This may be becoming redundant, but I've seen enough folks in my lifetime who have lung issues, whose hair is a disaster. And I don't mean style-wise, I mean like breaking off. Style, like that's you, whatever you do. But I cut hair for enough years to see this was dry and brittle because in here, they weren't getting any oxygen. When we don't oxygenate ourselves, our body kind of goes to crap at sometimes. And it always comes out on your hair, skin, and nails first. It's interesting, you know, as a former hairdresser, when people are having health struggles or situations, I'm like, how's your hair? How's your nails? How's your skin? Right, Lisa? I mean, you look at that first and say, how's all that? From there, you look at the endocrine system, and on, or maybe even the gut, and just see what's happening. But everything comes out on your hair, skin, and nails first. It's really interesting how that happens. So this is something for those of you who have heard me talk about breathing. This is a refresher, but also it's probably your cue to share it with somebody else. I say in my classes often that when you hear something and you start to master it, now you're obligated to go around and share it with somebody else. Because there's a lot of people in our world that might just need someone to look them in the eye, hold them by their face or their hands, say, just breathe, let me breathe with you, let me teach you something. And when we're breathing, it's a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, right, slowly, and then we also exhale that. If you're in a place where you can have essential oils, that would be incredible. Because breathing is great, essential oils are great, you marry them together, and now you have this recipe to not only slow your breath down, slow your heart rate down, but now the oils are working double time, and they're going in, they're healing parts of your body, your cells that needed to be healed. They're starting to rewrite the neural pathways in your brain. They're helping oxygenate your brain even more. They're calming the nervous system. Side note, something I remembered about the nervous system, and it just came to my mind, so I'm going to share with you all. Maybe you all know this already, but our cells do a complete turnover every 7 years. They do regenerate, every 3 to however many months, I believe, except for our brain cells, right, Lisa? Correct me if I'm off, please. But I had it written down in some notes. I thought, I did not remember that. But every body system resets except your nervous system. I thought that was interesting. We really need to care for our nervous system. And even just doing a quick Google search on the nervous system and what it involves, when you've got your brain, you've got your spinal cord, you've got all those little nerve endings that go out, branches from the spinal cord, caring for it, using your lavender on purpose with intention, breathing it in the morning, at night, as you're practicing this is caring for it. It's reinforcing that nervous system. It's really a beautiful thing when we think about our oils. I'll pause on what we were talking about, triggers, for a minute, and going back to using our oils with more intention and more purpose. We begin to understand how, we brush our teeth every day, we wash our hair. Using our oils is the same idea. We understand that God gave us these plants, these trees, these roots, these seeds, all of this, so that anything that goes awry can be fixed. But really, more than that, it's preventative. It's stunning to me how these oils really, when used with intention, I've got frankincense, lavender, cedarwood, I've got hope, and I've even got this aloe oil here, which is not necessarily preventative, but more of a response to an injury. These oils are stunning. I hope that you guys are utilizing them often, daily and often. When you breathe, going back to our mastery, as I mentioned earlier on, make sure that your abdomen area is puffing out and not your chest. When you're in flight or fight mode, sometimes I don't say that right. Please forgive me my tongue. Yeah. And then I heard there's flight or fight. That doesn't even sound right. And then there's fawn, freeze, faint. There's a whole nother category that frankly I just have not taken the time or the wherewithal. It's like, I don't want to. Yes, we do things that our body we shouldn't be doing. All these F words, and not the one everyone thinks of when you say an F word. But having them all together, it's like, well, I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. When we get into that mode, this part starts to like up and down, up and down, up and down, right? If you run or you walk really fast, when you exercise, we're talking about doing Pilates or stretching. It's shallow breathing, it's short breaths, because we're trying to get as much air as we can, as quickly as we can, so that we can oxygenate the whole body fast, because we're working out, we're exercising. But in a stressful situation, this is not helpful. It needs to come from down here. Because to take that long drawing breath up and out helps to slow everything down, including your adrenal glands, so that it's not pumping out cortisol and it's not pumping out adrenaline. Remember, we practice this now when we're not being triggered, just like soldiers practice for war in times of peace, not wartime. Can you imagine? The police, fire department, they're always doing running drills during times when they're not going out on an assignment. So we practice this now so that we're able to remain calm in an ugly situation or time of being triggered rather. The third step is to ground. You know, if you read the scriptures, you understand it's very clear on this one. We need to ground. You know, unfortunately, there's a lot of things out there that have caused some folks to think, well, when you say grounding, it sounds kind of woo-woo. No, it doesn't. I mean, maybe it does to you, but it's not. There's really nothing woo-woo about energy, frequency, the earth, the planet, none of that. God made it all. Nothing could be further from the truth. The word says to stand firm, be immovable, unshakable. Grounding ourselves is the act of making our bodies stand firm. And when we practice this, right, if we practice pausing, then we practice breathing and breathing in our oils. When we ground ourselves, we practice literally not being swayed or figuratively not being swayed by anything at any time. So we can practice grounding several ways. We can, when we use our oils, we can use the tree oils, right? You have your cedarwood, your spruces. Ladies, help me. I'm trying to, I guess it's just that, right? Or the blend of those. I often think of Sacred Mountain, something that is high frequency. It's going to root you to the earth. We breathe that in, you feel more stabilized. It stabilizes every part of your nervous system. Northern Lights Black Spruce. Right. Thank you, Joanne. Yes. That one is powerful. Okay, IGF. I'm sorry. I thought I could get that really quick, but now she's going to write it out and I'm going to laugh. Idaho Grand Fir. Right. Not Idaho Balsam Fir. I'm really glad they changed it because I love it. The acronym used to be IBS. And so someone would type out IBS in a question. I'm like, you mean like the disease? No, Idaho Balsam. Okay, got it. Yeah, I like Idaho Grand Fir better. So Joanne mentioned Northern Lights Black Spruce, and this is such an incredible grounding oil because it does draw a lot of energy from the Northern Lights. There is so much power and energy in the sun, and if it's harnessed properly, and not trying to hurt people with burning them in skin situations or making them too hot, but really channeling that into the plants and into the trees. Now we have it and we breathe this in and all of a sudden our frequency goes up exponentially. So we breathe in our oils, we use our oils on our person, down our spine, on our wrists, over our head, right over the crown, over our forehead. In addition, we can ground our feet in the ground. There's energy from the sun, there's energy from our atmosphere, there's also energy from the earth. I love studying frequency and vibrations of the earth and creation and rocks and all of this. It's fascinating. But putting your feet in the ground, I mean, you know, in the 60s, they got it right, walking around barefoot. It's so good for you. It's very cleansing. And for my friends who live in the snow, I'm looking at Deb, Pamela, and some other of our friends who aren't on live, right? Living up in Minnesota or just in Chicago, that area, it's cold. So in the winter, grounding can get a little tricky. If you want to do a little polar bear challenge, going out, putting your tootsies in the snow. I've done it when we lived on the East Coast and it's fun. And your feet, they shouldn't get frostbite. Just do it just 2 or 3 minutes. Standing there, feet firmly planted. Snow grounding is fun. It is. But if you are absolutely not a fan of snow, not a fan of cold, doing it on your floor in your home. If you are on the ground floor, for those of you in the north where it does snow, chances are you have a basement. I think that's even more grounded because now you're below the ground. And you still have that vibration. It's still connecting. The point is to get to a place where you can do that. And it has an interesting effect on your body at a cellular level. When you're grounding, make sure that your feet are firmly planted, even if you can grip your toes. Just sit and become really introspective and feel your frequency of your body raise as you do that. And notice how you're feeling before you do it. Don't use any oils. Go out and see. Just notice a change. It may not happen within a minute. So you'd want to stand. It's a really cool thing. As you place your hands in your hips just to stabilize yourself, or your hands by your side, you might even take your Valor. Some of you guys, we've talked about this before on here, but taking your Valor, rubbing it on your wrist and holding it so you can feel the pulse in both of your wrists. That's really fun to make sure that the energy is flowing. The pathways are clear is basically the best way I can say. Just a side note, if you do that and you don't feel your pulse, please don't text me tomorrow and say, I can't feel my pulse, because my response to you will be like, you're alive. I promise you. I can't tell you how many times I have had people say, I did the thing with my wrist and I don't feel it. I don't feel my pulse. I'm like, I'm not sure why you're concerned, because we're having a conversation. You're all set. Probably you just need to slow it down a little bit more. Right? When we get into a rush, we're like, okay, I don't feel it, which actually makes me think, well, your heart rate's probably going up because you're concerned and nervous. I would think you'd feel it more, but you're alive, I can assure you. When we do this, we understand that grounding is so key in emotional support and mastering triggers. And then when you are being triggered, when something new comes up, just that positioning, standing with your feet firmly planted, no matter where you are, whether you're barefoot or fully shod, right? Having the snow boots or bare feet. And you're breathing with or without your oils, and you're pausing. The amount of control that you have at that point is incredible. You start to see that the things that triggered you before don't trigger you as much. And even as you're doing it, there's this mental dialogue going on, at least for me. I can't read your mind, but I can only assume, because I've coached enough people. They start to ask a lot of questions like, you know what, this situation here, this isn't a bad situation. There's no reason to be triggered. And you might even begin to drift back to a time when the very first time you felt that way, right as we do an AFT, and you realize, oh, this is not that, or this is not that, I guess I should say. And, oh, well, let me revisit that later when I have my oils and I have some time to breathe through it and process it. And all of this mental dialogue is happening in a matter of 60 seconds. All while you're giving yourself to see this situation, it's not detrimental. This situation that you find yourself in that's triggering you, that's feeling upset, you know what, all of a sudden, as you start to put it where it needs to be, the cool thing is that if it is a problem, in the case of my mailbox, you can say, okay, let's see, what are our options here? And really think it through. I wanted to touch on triggering tonight as we move into a new season. We're starting to get more into the winter season and then to a different one coming in November, because it's so important for us to really assess where we are emotionally and see what things are true problems, true situations, and things that are just reminiscing and dredging up the past. So I hope tonight, before you go to sleep, you'll practice pausing, breathing in with your oils, especially because it's nighttime. You should be going to sleep soon. If you're watching this later, give it a try in the middle of the day. There's nothing better than taking 5 minutes out of your day to pause, to breathe, especially with oils, and to go outside and ground. Ground in your house if it's snowing where you are. revisit this session tonight several times in the next few days and few weeks. You guys, we're on an election season, and it doesn't matter what aisle of the road you sit or stand on, but there is a lot of ugliness out there, a lot. And even if the 6 of us watching now can make it a practice to do this, the average, what is it? We each know 3,000 people. We each come in contact, right, in our sphere, because we contact somebody and then they contact somebody, and on it goes. Can you imagine the ripple effect? That's always my goal. And anytime I teach anything is I want to have this ripple effect of just goodness. So as we have this election season, and then the holidays come, and then this is a prime time for people to feel things very deeply. Practice this trigger mastery, share it with somebody, so that you can come out of this season soaring in a stunning place. Do y'all have any questions before we stop the recording, or comments?